Hi there. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interview Nick Kindler. Nick is a keynote speaker, communication coach, and he's author of Impact, a blueprint to help business leaders to become a better communicator. If you are a business owner or if you're in any leadership position, you don't want to miss this episode. We had a discussion on how communication changed during this pandemic. Among many other items, your staff's requirement for communication from business leaders have changed. Also, your customers' expectation from communication have also changed. So, and these expectations for your staff and customers not going back to pre-pandemic. Nick also outlined impact model and a structural approach how to be an effective communicator. He also outlined step-by-step approach to a clear and concise messaging. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe and send us your feedback. Until next time, enjoy this episode. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Nick Kindler. Nick is he's a TEDx speaker, he's a communication coach. He's also author of a new book, Impact. And Nick, that your area of expertise in communication, this was one of the area during this COVID. If nothing else was important for business leaders, this was the area it was important to stay connected with the staff and communicate with your people. I'm looking forward to a discussion, learning from you, and also always student of communication. You can never be perfect in communication. So thank you so much for time today.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me here, Gurmeet. It's nice to be chatting with you on this very cold Toronto day.
Yeah, you got it. So tell us what's happening in communication. Where you see that what the gap's been in during this COVID. How does that impact business leadership and the staff? If you just give us your thoughts where we are at the moment.
Well, I think what, and we've probably heard this before in different ways, but what happened with COVID, it accelerated change dramatically. So where there might have been challenges or gaps or problems before, it just sped them up and made them bigger and deeper. So for example, there are really kind of three core problems that leaders have with communication. One, they don't have enough time. Two, they have a challenge with getting clear, and because of the lack of clarity and the lack of time, their position as a leader is impacted. And so what COVID did is it gave us way more time to work from home, right?
Wow.
Wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but this is my 6th hour on a Zoom today. I'm thrilled to be here, by the way, but 6 hours on a Zoom, meaning I haven't had much time except for a few minutes before each session to stop, think, and plan. Now, most senior leaders and entrepreneurs and executives, I bet you if we could do a poll right now, everyone would say no breaks. I get no breaks from the moment I start the day to the moment I finish the day. And that is the ultimate challenge. People don't have the time to sit and think and get clear. So that to me is kind of why COVID has exacerbated the situation of communication or the challenge of communication.
Wow. So it's just now finding a time to sit and just think it through what you need to, or is simply just people not in a habit of, gaining clarity and their, I don't know if he's sitting by yourself, you're going to gain clarity, or you're going to do different things to gain a clarity.
So the challenge, of course, these problems existed before COVID. They got worse because of COVID. So the challenge was people didn't often spend enough time getting clear and sitting and some people often don't have the tools or the techniques to gain clarity in their communication. So part of it is they don't have the time, they don't have the clarity, but part of the reason why they don't have that clarity is they don't have the techniques or tools in order to get clear on what they want to say and how they want to say it.
I think that's very critical. I don't know if I mentioned that to you. I'm an avid runner. I run quite a bit even on a winter run.
Me too. Were you out today?
Not today. I was yesterday. When I started jogging, it was more for health reasons, and simply I wanted to listen to books. I wanted to run, but I didn't realize how much it did for my clarity. After I'm more clear on everything after I finish my jog and I sit down. So that adds, for me, I didn't know what tools I need, what techniques I need. I just run, and that gives me clarity. It gives me time to think about it. It gives me time to consume some content, some good books.
Yeah.
But that adds clarity. So what are the other tools that people, you mentioned the tools and techniques. Is there one of those techniques, or is there more tools and techniques that people need to learn and work on the self?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would say is that's a great starting point, what you just talked about, Gurmeet, which is you've carved out time as a leader to do something, number one, that's good for you. There's probably debate whether it's good for you in -20, but I do it anyways. I like it as well.
It's perfect.
Yeah, but the question then is, so you're carving out time you are feeding yourself with books. It sounds like audiobooks and podcasts. But what about the time to stop and actually think and articulate what it is that you want to say? And so in terms of tools, in my book and in my programs, we share a tool called the Communication Canvas. And this is very simple, but it's also really challenging to dive into, because it starts with getting very, very clear on your purpose. And purpose is really what you want to talk about. It's the action around the topic that you want to talk about. And in taking that action around that topic, what outcome, what potential future state are you going to create? And so if we can, that's just one tool, for example, the Communication Canvas, and getting clear on the purpose to start. But then once you've got that purpose, you can start breaking down other components of messaging. But that's just one example.
So talk about, how big is this part of any business leaders you're listening or you're following us? How big is this part of somebody's success? If you look at successful business leaders, successful CEOs, communication is probably, they're great innovators. They invent stuff, they build stuff. But how big is the communication part, of their strategy, or how good communicate? You can build whatever you want to build. Unless you are effectively communicate to your staff, nobody's going to follow you. You got to be able to bring that idea and get people to buy into those ideas. That's where a lot of persuasion comes in, and also communication effectively comes in, right?
Absolutely. Communication, or let me rephrase that. Leadership is communication. If you can't communicate as a leader, you are not going to succeed as a leader. And so if you can't, number one, articulate your ideas, your concepts, your vision in a way, not just communicate it, but in a way that engages people to rally around that vision, you will not be successful. And in fact, as you build larger companies and larger entities, you need teams of people that are also on your leadership team and management team that are also exceptional communicators, so that they can also take that vision and make it their own within their own divisions, within their own departments, so that they can engage their teams. So communication is, in my opinion, one of the core competencies of a great leader.
And it changes over the time, right? So if you're communicating one-to-one like we're doing right now, or this different style of communication, the way you want to get your message across. When you communicate to a smaller team, 5-10 people, it's different. But as you scale up your business, now you're communicating to a bigger audience that you need to get your message across in a very, very short format. And does that style change? What changes then? How do you approach that? It's a different level of communication now you have to communicate with the people.
Well, it's interesting. Does it change if I'm with one-on-one, we're chatting. If I'm chatting with 1-on-10 and then 1-on-100, 1-on-1,000, it changes in terms of depending on how you, as a leader, if you get nervous when you get in front of larger groups, or if, but most importantly, it's about going back to that clarity of message. Now, there are things that I think leaders should start to do if they want to engage their either 1-on-1, 1-on-10, 1-on-100, 1-on-1,000, or 1-to-1,000. And that is, you simplify. You've got to simplify your messaging so that people understand it, can rally around it. But how do you get them to rally around it? Well, the second principle that I share in my book and in my programs is all about transforming that simplified structure, simplified content. And that is really embracing storytelling and emotional language or rhetorical devices that allow you to engage with your audience on a deeper level. It allows you to make help them understand the concept. So, for example, Gurmeet, I hate to turn the interview over, but
No,
tell me about like if you have a complex, do you have a complex service or problem that you solve in your business for your clients?
More, we are blessed that way. Most problems we solve in a technology business, they are a complex problem.
Right.
If they could have solved themselves, they would have solved it before even they talking to us. So we have to solve those complex problems.
Right. So let's just, if one of those problems is complex and yet the person that's buying it may not fully understand the problem because
Yeah.
maybe they've inherited the portfolio in the business or whatever it is. Your job is to not just simplify the messaging as a salesperson or as a service-oriented person, or even as someone helping them understand what it is that you can do for them in general, but it's also to translate it and transform it. So what you would want to do is tell a story around it, or use rhetorical devices. This piece of technology is kind of like the tortoise and the hare, right? As soon as I use tortoise and the hare, people know what I'm talking about. Slow and steady wins the race. The guy that's the hare that's always racing ahead and getting cocky, they end up losing, right? This is the old story of the tortoise and the hare. As soon as you use an analogy or a metaphor, or you share a story, it immediately creates an understanding. And so under this concept of transforming the content that's being simplified is vital.
Very interesting. Technology itself is logical, is not a boring, what I would say. It may be interesting to some people, but most business leaders, they have a business somewhere else. They're trying to build products. They're trying to do technology is just a tool for them to move business forward, right? So I think you that's a great point. That unless you're telling us stories around that, otherwise the boring technology over and over the same thing, people lose interest in it. But if you have an interesting story that you can relate to, that makes it more interesting. I guess it's easy to digest a bit.
Absolutely, and not just digestible, but memorable, right?
Memorable, yeah.
And isn't that what we want? We want. There's a couple of things we want when we're chatting with customers or our teams. We want them we want them to understand what we're talking about. We want them to truly understand what we're sharing with them. But then we want them to remember it, right? We want them to walk away and even be able to share what they heard from the leader with other people, so that it either cascades or goes across the organization or even outside of the organization in a very coherent way.
So how do you relate those stories back to the message you're trying to deliver, right? So you may be trying to do in a technology and something else, in trying to develop some result. How do you find story? How do you develop those stories that you can convey the message you're trying to convey back to your clients? Is that skill? Is that something you got to work on? Is it a technique? How does somebody comes up with those stories?
It is a skill. Presentations, communication is a practice as well as a skill. Because if you become better and better at it, if you practice it, the skill improves. So it's something you can increase your capability for sure. In terms of storytelling, like being able to, so there's two things. One, I highly recommend when you're looking, once you've articulated the messaging, is the first step, that you've simplified your content and you're trying to transform it using storytelling. You need to start thinking about, first and foremost, well, what kind of story do I want to tell here? It must connect with your purpose. So you've spent the time creating your purpose, the what, the how, and the why of what you're there to talk about. You've got all your messaging that supports that purpose. But then, what's the story that's going to help people understand why you're there? And ideally, that story, which connects to your purpose, also relates to you. So whenever possible, find a story that is yours. So for example, and actually this is great for your business too. I was working with a terrific expert in medical technologies from the UAE. And he has a terrific technology that helps hospitals be able to be better, help doctors better understand what history has happened with their patients. So it's a technology that helps you basically read a dashboard, right, of what's going on. He told a story, a terrific story, about how he loves macchiatos. What the heck does macchiatos have to do with this? But what it was he wanted to be able to make his own macchiato. So he bought a coffee maker. The special coffee maker, high-end coffee maker, didn't work. So he had to customize the coffee maker after doing some trial and error until he made the perfect macchiato. Now he knows how to do it perfectly, time and again. And that linked perfectly to his purpose statement around we need to be able to personalize technology so it works on our behalf. And then he's able to drive beautifully into all of the features of these technologies that allow them to personalize this experience for the doctor and for the patient.
Very effective though, right? So, you can communicate so effectively and you can get that, get people to understand very well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a great point, Nick. So how does this work in a corporate world? Business leader, they have a stories, they tell story, they know why they got to do business, they tell story. How about their staff? They can't be telling the same story because that's not their stories, I guess, right? So how do you develop a story that everybody can tell the same story, or people going to tell their own stories and relate to that? How does that process works?
So you're right. You don't want to be So if this gentleman that I mentioned had a team, he wouldn't want his team to talk about this coffee. It's not their story. Yeah. So first of all, we need to begin to embrace a culture of storytelling, and not in a way that wastes time. Because hey, let me tell you about what I did on the weekend. Although we should spend time to connect, because that's a cultural thing that we should do at work. But more about how do we embrace storytelling within our communications so that we become more engaging and help connect more deeply with our customers or our stakeholders. So the things that you can do, number one, is learn the process of storytelling. Most people think they know how to tell a story, or some people say, I'm not great at it. It's because they don't know the structure. And in my book and in my programs, we embrace a tool called the Story Spine, which actually I didn't invent myself. It was created by a playwright in the 90s called Kevin Adams, or Kevin, oh my goodness, the name. Anyway, a playwright in the 90s. Okay. This process was co-opted by Pixar, the filmmaking animation company. And every single Pixar movie ever made has used the Story Spine to test its story structure. Okay. And the story structure can be used to tell a personal story, like the coffee maker story, or a case study. It doesn't matter. It allows you to kind of make sure that the core elements of a story are in place. And in my opinion, the core elements of a story are five core elements. Okay. Environment. Okay. Characters. Okay. Conflict. Okay. And this is the trick. Raised conflict. So it gets worse before it gets better. Okay. And finally, an outcome. What's the outcome? Win or lose? Live or die?
So no matter how big the story is, you still want to capture those five elements, which you're saying.
If you have ever experienced, as I have, being at a cocktail party and sharing a story, or in a social situation, you tell a story and it just kind of falls flat on the floor. Everyone's like, someone changes the subject quickly. Yeah. Has this happened to you?
Oh, all the time.
Right. It's because those five elements are not at play. You haven't included one of those five elements.
For me personally, the conflict piece is a hard to, those are the emotions you want to forget about it, because you had a conflict somewhere in the life that, those were, when I was building, there's so many conflict when you're building a company, right? So you go through some of those failures, and that's where the conflict is, the failures, right? So revisiting those emotions, that's the hardest piece. You want to revisit those emotions that tell us stories around it. A little bit emotional, and you want to stay away from it because that's more comfortable. I
Yes.
think that's the hardest piece for me. I'm not sure other people struggle with the same thing, but I struggle that those hardest time I gone through. I don't want to revisit them because those one hurts, man. When you think about it, that's painful.
Yeah, but let me just play that out a little bit. And,
Okay.
and, and what if you did? Like, what if you did share them? What happens? So there's a couple of things I would think. I mean, and I'm not saying every personal tragedy you share in a corporate environment. No, not at all. But what it does is it shows vulnerability.
Human side.
And when you're vulnerable in any situation, it's actually a potentially an opportunity to show strength, which sounds counterintuitive. But for me to sit here and tell you about some unique challenge that I had, that I'm struggling with, or that I struggled with, there's likely, unless I fall apart, right? Then you kind of go, I don't know what to do with this, or I'm not saying you would back away, you might support, or whatever you would do. Then it becomes slightly different. But if you're in control of the story and in control of your narrative and know what you want to say and you're clear, then the sharing of your own personal experience and vulnerability can provide strength to who you are, because it also helps people understand who you are and they can relate to it. They will be able to relate to that vulnerability in one way, shape, or form. So I understand the reality is, especially people in the left brain fields, science, academics, technologists, or services in the technology, there's a desire to stay away from some of those personal stories. It's easier to not.
Much easier, yeah.
It's much easier. But when you put in the work to tell that story, the output and the outcome is greater.
And a lot of work required, as you mentioned, that getting the clarity and thinking through those stories. It's a lot of work. And I was thinking about this similar scenario, and I started writing some of those stories during the Christmas time. I'm still yet to finish I'm still working on the first one. I haven't got further than the first one, but it's a hard work. I think that's where the work comes in. You got to put a work in, to get the output from that, right?
Yeah, I highly recommend anybody just writing, even if they don't want to publish it on wherever, like blogs or LinkedIn. It's okay. Writing is a transformational and cathartic experience. It allows you to articulate ideas that were sitting in your unconscious or subconscious that you weren't aware of. It allows you to get clear on things that you were thinking about that you weren't able to get clear on. It's a conversation with yourself, which is often the hardest conversation to have.
Yeah. Somebody sent me a good tips. They said, well, you take a poster and you draw your face in the middle of the poster, right? So you put your name on it, and then you put all the stuff you've been in life around it, little circles. I was, a sports person. I was, corporate employees. So you put all those, items around it, and then you start writing stories on each item where you've been, and then use that for, it works in a marketing as well. Then you find out who you are and what story you want to tell in a marketing, and that form. I haven't gone up, from a first. I'm still at the first step. I haven't gone through it, but I think it's a good exercise.
There's another one that I'll recommend, and I didn't create this one, but I have co-opted it in some of my programs, where people say to me, "Well, I can't figure out what story to tell, like what personal story." So, by this point, of course, you know what your purpose is and your structure is. But there's an exercise that we do in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and I'm on the board of EO Toronto and have a forum group that I'm part of. And when you join a forum group, you want to talk about the highlights and the lowlights of your life, not just your business, but of your life. So family, personal, and business. And what you do is you kind of create a line across a page, and then depending on your age, you start at 0, and then you do even spaces all the way to, I'm 20, so I would finish here. That was a joke. I'm not 20, but
we'll pretend.
You get my point. Anyways, at whatever age you are, you put and then it's like an EKG, right? It's highlights and lowlights. The middle line is just average. So if you, won the spelling bee when you were in grade 6, and it was so great, it's early on in your career, in your life, you might put it here, right up here. For example, when in my 20s, I was one of the stars on a CBC sketch comedy show. I put it right up here, performing live in front of a studio audience. My comedy bit, awesome, right up there. My father passing away, right down. You can't see it, but right down at the bottom, right? So that allows you to create milestones in your life that are meaningful, both high and low. And it doesn't mean that you have to choose the negative one. You can choose the positive one, or the not so, or the almost positive, or the slightly positive. It all depends on what you're trying to share. But it allows you to look at your life on a page.
Yeah.
And it helps identify in a similar way some of the peaks and valleys that also, because there's conflict in both a peak and a valley, that's where you'll have a story.
So there's a conflict on a peak as well. I thought there's always conflict when you're low. On a high, there's a conflict too.
Well, let's talk about it. I didn't win a spelling bee, but I'm assuming that to get to the finals of a spelling bee, let's use that example. You're in the finals. Oh my gosh, there's like two people, and you probably remember it down. If you won a tennis championship, if you gave birth to a child, if you're a new father or a new mother. There are moments of conflict and adversity before that happens.
Yeah.
So it's all there. It's all in the story.
Wow, beautiful. Yeah. So even you have a high, what you done to get there, Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah. Think about if you sold your first company, or when you
what you gone through.
What you went through. And people don't think it. People think, oh, they exited. What an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do.
From business end, but this, when it comes to business, nothing easy. It's all hard work.
Yeah.
So let's talk about one of the items that so dear to me with the technology. Technology makes communication a little bit harder. We talk about two things. People don't have a time or they don't have a clarity, and a technology piece sometimes works against the clarity. There's so many tools, so many communication applications these days. Teams, Zooms, you name it. All those. We're talking on one. And it just takes away all the clarity that people have. How does that technology works, and how do people gain control over this? Because there's so many communication tools, there's so many apps on our phones as well. That notification, all that stuff goes on.
Yeah, I mean, now you're talking about something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is the power and the challenge of exponential communication, and communication tools that. Here's what's happening, in my opinion, Gurmeet. We live in the most incredible time on the history of this planet in terms of being able to communicate. And ironically, one of the most challenging times. And we touched on this earlier, but let's just talk about, and I actually say this at the beginning of my TEDx talk, that we have, everything from Zoom to Salesforce to WhatsApp, and we could spend the next day just listing off communication tools. Okay. And even in my small business, in your small business, you probably use at least 5 to 10 on a daily basis, from Slack to WhatsApp to email or Microsoft Outlook or whatever your custom, plus Zoom or Teams and what happens is we layer on complexity over complexity over complexity. And so it becomes very challenging to really know what tool to use to best communicate what it is that we need to do. I mean, one of these great examples, or what we hear all the time is, do we need to meet? Do we need to meet? Or the meetings I'm in are a waste of time. There's a statistic that I share, which is that I think it's 46% of employees in North America rarely leave a meeting knowing what to do next. And so there's a serious lack of clarity, and I think COVID has made it worse because we're zooming. And I don't mean just Zoom, but moving quickly from one meeting to the next without breaks. So then add another layer of complexity to it, which is, and you must have seen this in your work, Gurmeet, which is that the world of work itself is becoming more complex. So if you were in blockchain 5 years ago, this is what you could talk about. And today, this is what you could talk about, right? Like it's massive. If you are talking about information systems technology, you might have had this amount or this amount. And now now there's multiple categories of information systems that we need to kind of clarify. regenerative science, dermatology, ophthalmology, and every area is becoming more and more focused and more complex. So then you get complex tools and complex content, and they come together and they create often mud. It's unclear.
Yeah.
So what we need is a system or an operating system that allows you to kind of get through that and break through that mud and get through and create clarity around the tools, first of all, and then how do I communicate the messaging that I want to deliver.
When you say system, is that we have the more intelligence, filtering out all this stuff, or simply we need to create a system that can filter out for us all that stuff we don't need to deal with. So which one are you looking at, technology solution, or are you looking at humans? We need to get so smarter at that and make sure all that clutter stuff we simplify and get rid of it.
Well, I think so. First and foremost, I think it always starts with people. If we're carpenters or tradespeople, and I were or a gas fitter, I would come to your house to do play my role as a carpenter or a gas fitter, and I would have my tools that I would use specifically. Now, I am not handy, Gurmeet, so don't start asking me which kind of tools I would use as a carpenter or a gas fitter. But you know what I'm talking about. We have a tool, a chest of tools or a tool belt, and we would choose which ones we'd use. And that's because we know exactly what we need to do and we know how to do it for the most part. When we're coming on as a new employee in an organization, here's all the tools that we've got. We've got Zoom, we've got this, we've got that. We need to be able to create a criteria to help us decide which tool for which action or which tool for which outcome. Do we need to have a meeting? Do we need to send an email? Do we need to send a voicemail? No one listens to voicemails anymore. So that's the first part. And then when we're deciding how to deliver it, we've chosen the vehicle. How do we get clear? And that, there's probably a way to automate both. The first one's simply a decision tree customized by the customer or by the vendor or by the company. The second is something a little more different that I am developing on how to get clear on your messaging. It's an app that will help you ask you the questions that you need to answer in order to get really clear on what it is that you want to say and how you want to say it.
I want to share. I started doing something about a year ago because like my calendar is booked. All the meetings are piled up, so my day started very very early. I'm up 4 to 8 o'clock. My day is all packed with all that stuff. Yeah. So, one thing I started wondering that, all these meetings I do I really need all those meetings? Back to your point. Yes. And I wanted to see what I'm actually doing and what's in my calendar, what the gaps in between those two. Somebody sent me an app. I started using it called, Rescue Time. I started using it. So what it did was it started logging my time, where I'm doing in my time. So instead of the calendar, it started logging my time. When I started logging my time for a month, it showed me, you've been doing this. And then I looked at it, hey, this is what I was supposed to do in the calendar. This is what I'm doing. If I can improve on what I'm doing, I'll be more productive that way. And I can go to some meeting. So I started getting into some of the meetings and started doing more of what I was doing, what I was logging in, right?
Nice.
It also let you do that, hey, I want to focus more on in-person meetings instead of this or this. So I was able to adjust. But I saw the difference in that. But then I took that to my teams as well. People working, and they started doing it. It is a big gap between that. Gaining that clarity. I was hoping that it will get, people will get clarity by using that exercise, but didn't help as much. But I think the last piece missing was that what you just mentioned, that gaining that clarity where you want to define your goal. What is actually you trying to do as a staff and as a business leader, and then gain clarity on that, and then achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, that stat I shared earlier, 46% of employees rarely leave a meeting knowing what to do next. It's often because people don't say what they want people to do when they leave the meeting. So, at the end of this podcast, what do you want from Nick? Or what do we want from the audience? Go to this site or go and do this, click here, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's important. And that's just this podcast. But at the end, a planning meeting, a project meeting, whatever it is.
What's the outcome?
Yeah, what's the outcome? Specifically, what do I need you to do?
Very interesting. So business leaders who are watching us, Nick, if they want to start working on a communication, definitely, with their staff, I think there's so much communication happen on a business leader's perspective. You communicate with your vendors, you communicate with your staff, with your customers, with and then yourself, then your family. There's so many different channels of communication that you connect with so many people on a daily basis. Where do they start, working on that communication if they want to start working on, hey, listen, I need to take my communication in a totally different level where it was last year? How do they start? How do they work on this?
Well, I often say that, first of all, they want to have a goal, right? Like recognize the gap. So when they say, I want to start working on this, when people approach me and say, hey, I'd like to connect with you, I always spend the time trying to understand exactly what the gap is. Because sometimes they have a long-term goal, right? I want to speak at TED, or I want to, give a keynote presentation at Money 2020. And I say, well, those are great goals, but how many of those things are you doing, and how much speaking are you doing, and what are you standing for, and what's your purpose? So it's one thing. So I like to get clear on what's the gap. Like, what are they really missing? If they've identified that they wish they could be more coherent and clear in their presentations, or they want to save time in how they develop their messaging, or they want to stand out more. They want to be memorable. Well, then, if there were any of those things, then I would say, okay, number one, pick up my book. First of all, it's a great resource to help you get clear and save time and stand out for sure as a speaker. It goes through the principles of communicating with impact, and it's kind of like sitting across from me, coaching you and telling you what to do next. It also gives you access to a whole bunch of tools. A lot of what I've mentioned, some of which I've mentioned already today. So that's one thing. I would suggest, also, if you're interested in learning more, then reach out to me. I'm happy to have those conversations with leaders that want to improve themselves, or maybe even improve their teams and help them become better communicators and better presenters and pitchers.
Very interesting. Did the video we didn't talk about, we used to communicate in an email and a phone messages, totally different communication. Did the video during this pandemic force the business leader to be better at communication? Because, we're doing everything on a video. It's a lot more intuitive right away. You can see that, body language. You can see a lot more than just simply in an email.
Yeah, except, and don't worry, I'm doing this on purpose, except that this is most of the Teams meetings that we see, right? This is it. And it's a voiceover with a PowerPoint and a visual. So I'm coming back. Don't worry. I'm there. There we go. But so actually, it's given people an out. Now, there's a reason why they've had an out, right? We know, for example, that we've all had to retreat to our homes for long periods of time. People with small children are setting them up in front of a virtual classroom. The proliferation of COVID puppies means there's more barking. So we've got babies, we've got children, we've got puppies, and there's certainly cats, all making noise and jumping around in the background. I personally, as a presenter, would rather see the person and have their child on their lap, or knowing that I'd rather even hear in the background a little bit if it wasn't too disruptive. So the reality is, it actually has eroded the ability to communicate, even though we've got these cameras. Because I don't know how many meetings you have a day. Would you say everybody is on camera, or would you say the majority of people are off camera, especially in larger meetings?
With our team, we give no choice, but I know when we talk to customers and we talk to somebody else, you're absolutely right. I'm usually speaking on a camera, and somebody else just on audio.
Yeah, and it can be challenging, and I'm fine to make do. But look, I can see you right now. You're agreeing with what I'm saying. There's like an engagement. You're nodding your head, right? I don't have to hear it even. I mean, you could have been muted, and I'm like, oh, he's engaged.
Yeah.
So I need to see that as a speaker, but I also need to see it if I'm not presenting, to see what other people are saying. I had a unique experience in one of my accelerator programs, not actually just recently, where one of the participants said something that was misunderstood by everybody, and it came across as inappropriate. On first glance, it was inappropriate, but he actually had a challenge of communicating, which is what he's there learning how to do, his big idea. And so when I paused and saw heard what he'd said and saw his body language, and then looked at everybody else's body language and heard their reaction, which was silence, and their mics were on, I knew that I needed to jump in and just do a little bit of massaging around what's going on and explain, I can tell that this didn't land well. Can you extrapolate a little bit? Because I don't think you meant to say it this way. And he very quickly adjusted and clarified, and it went just fine. But it was a moment of like, you can't say that. That's inappropriate. And so we need to be able to see and hear each other in order to read each other's reactions. It's because I could see the other two people.
Yeah, no, that's a difficult, but sometimes you just have to, I see even our team, I got so much pushback when we enforced that, everybody needs to be in camera. Everybody was pushing back because people are just not comfortable, I guess, right? But once you get comfortable, I think it's much better communication with your team, and COVID gave no choice, right? You have to communicate with your team. But let's talk about business leaders. When we were in the office, Nick, people were in the office. We used to manage people, put everybody in the same room, and we used to communicate, directly with them. It's much easier that way, right? So we can get a feedback right there and then. Everybody was in the same room, and everything's clear. But now in a Zoom, even though we have our cameras on, when business leaders are communicating or trying to, manage their people, even though there's cameras, but there could be a lot of miscommunication. There could be a family member sitting next to them, or there could be something else going on in the family. Is that changing for business leaders? So they have to find a different skill set to communicate, over the technology than in a person?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not the same. It requires actually more effort. Actually, let me go back and say it required more effort in person than people were giving as well. Right? It's not that. It's not like everyone was masterful in the boardroom or in the training room or in the meeting room. There was lots of room for improvement already, and so in person, in Zoom, in virtual like this, there are a lot of things that we need to do. So, we need to set ourselves up for success. No matter where we are, whether we're in a meeting room live or in a virtual setting. And so I can see you've got a ring light, you've got your nice filter on the background, or a Zoom filter on, you're wearing a jacket, your backdrop, I don't know, it looks like it's virtual, I can't tell, or maybe you just are in a high rise in Toronto right now, which is fantastic. Either way, it's clean. It's clean. My background, I haven't changed it in a long time, but it's constructed, right? I mean, I decided to put my bookshelf, to move my things, so my bookshelf is mine. In fact, I had previous programs that I had just a white screen and I could put things in green screen up. And I had a designer friend of mine who's one of the top designers in Canada, an interior designer. She said, Nick, you gotta change that. Like put a bookshelf behind you and put your books up. And so I was like, okay. So that's constructed. There's a reason why all of this is behind me, right? It's because it looks better than, and it's also symmetry, right? It's better than that, right? Or it's better than that. I won't keep going. The second thing is it's lit, right? It's well lit. You've got a ring light. I've got a couple of umbrella lights. There's a good camera that is at eye level. I'm using something called a plexicam that allows me to adjust and still look at you, by the way, while I'm looking at the camera, so that I'm engaging, which is really important. When we chat in person, I'm looking at you in the eye. If I'm talking to you like this, which is, we see a lot of Zoom meetings and team meetings where people are like, yeah, looking at the the slides, I see that we can. This is the most disengaged presentation, right? I need to be looking at you. And finally, if you can, whenever you're having a presentation or a meeting and you're running it in particular, stand up. Find a way to stand up.
Yeah.
Because it gives you the power of body language and gesture, including the use of your hands and even a little bit of motion that allows you to engage with your audience in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting. So yeah, I know. I started when I originally started a podcast. I was standing up, but it was causing a little bit issue with my setup a little bit. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna do by sitting, but I think I like that idea better. Actually, standing up gives a lot more chances to communicate better.
That's me. By the way, you want to sit for your podcast? It's a radio show or whatever it is. No judgment at all from Nick here. I just.
Don't feel bad. I'm actually the same way. I'm much better communicator when I'm standing up.
Okay.
I do much better job at that when I'm standing up because I'm always used to standing up and just speaking in an office or speaking to client. I'm always standing up. Even my phone rings now, I'll stand up and take a phone call.
Yeah, because there's more energy, right?
More energy.
Yeah.
I'm paying a lot more attention when I'm walking around than I'm sitting and paying attention to the call.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about your book, Nick. What inspired to write a book? And if you give us a little bit of snaps of what his book is about. You already talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And give us a little bit more version of it. What people can expect from book.
Well, it's funny. If you in the introduction, I tell this story, which is early days of COVID. I'm sitting, watching the headlines, realizing that there's going to be no in-person meetings. I'm going to be running no workshops. And I realized, wow, people are going to need help with their communication. People are really going to need some help. And I'm like, I start writing. I put all of the work down, all of the workshop work that I've done over the years, over the last 15, 20 years, on the floor. And I'm like, I need to get some writing utensils to get clear on it. Post-its so I can organize things. So I go upstairs and my wife is on her, 7th hour of Teams meetings calls. And as I go in and I tell this story at the beginning of my book, she says to me, take a look at this. And it's basically a Teams meeting mirror of a Teams meeting of a Teams meeting of a Teams meeting of a Teams meeting. So somebody's showing the video screen of a video screen of a video screen and on it goes, right? So we're going back. And she turns to me and she says, it's been like this for 15 minutes and we haven't started our meeting yet. And I went, okay, people really, really need help. People need help on how to manage the technology, yes, but how to communicate and set yourself up for success, both in an in-person and virtual world. Mm-hmm. And so I dove in 2 years ago, started writing, literally when COVID hit, every day I would write for a few hours. And then I really wanted to help specifically people in the innovation space become better at communicating. So people with complex jobs, complex businesses. And so I wrote the book and I wrote it and published it in spring of last year.
I see. Very nice. Yeah, no, definitely in a innovation world, in my world, same way, service we deliver is a complex topic. Not a lot of people are expert at that, but they need a service to run a businesses. So we bring it to a very, very simple level where people can, understand technology in a financial terms, or they need whatever they need to make a decision on. At least is very simple enough for them to make a decision. But it is challenge. That's where you need work. Definitely. I'm waiting for your book to arrive, so I'm gonna go through it. I will recommend people who are watching, go order the book. Where can they? Yeah, perfect. Where can they find? Where can they order from? Amazon, I take it.
They can get it on Amazon, but also if you go to impactbook.ca, depending on where you're located in the world, all of the different Amazons have it, but also different online book selling sites. Basically, wherever online books are sold, you can purchase it there.
I will include a link below the video as well. So let's talk about your workshops, Nick. How do you help business leaders, who wants to work on this? Working by yourself, you can make so many mistakes. There's so many blind. You always need help from somebody to get better at. I'm always looking for somebody to help me because I don't have enough time to go through myself. I'm looking, hey, how can you get me there faster than I'm gonna get there by myself? So how do you help the business leaders and how do they approach and how does the system works?
Yeah, so there's kind of two core ways that I support organizations. Well, three actually. Now that I think about it when I'm articulating it, the first is if it's a larger enterprise organization, we offer custom bespoke programs that help them with their sales teams or their larger teams get clear on messaging, and we offer ongoing kind of accelerator training programs for them customized.
Yeah.
I offer what I call an Impact Accelerator program, which helps innovators from around the world save time, get clear, and stand out. It's a 6-month program that embraces the core principles that we've talked about today: simplify your messaging, transform using storytelling, and then embrace a mindset of performance. So perform every single time you present. It takes people from complex idea to delivering a online or in-person keynote, TED style or TED worthy, if you will, so that it's really elevating your content and your messaging. And then the final piece is I offer what I call thought leadership coaching. It's one-on-one executive thought leadership, where I take that leader every month. We have a couple of different sessions through their ideas. We basically make it turnkey for you. Take your ideas, summarize them, do research, help build a talk based on your language, your ideas, with your concepts, so that you can have access to a framework every time you need to present or pitch. So those are just some examples of the programs: the Impact Thought Leadership, Impact Accelerator program, and then we also do custom bespoke programs for organizations.
Preparing for TED Talk or preparing for a sales meeting, is it a different style of communication, Nick? Because one is simply you trying to educate people. Another one is you need to persuade and get somebody to move forward with you. Do you help with the both, or is it just more of a TED Talk preparation?
No, yeah. Thanks for the clarification, Gurmeet. There's actually 6 different kinds of presentations and communication that I outline in my book. And they can be anything from an update to a persuasion to an information to inspiration. So there's different ways of going, and I won't go through all of them. What we do in our accelerator, as well as all of our programs, we focus it to meet the needs of the actual learner. So they may not everyone's giving a TED Talk, but they do want to communicate more clearly. Well, what I was saying is we create a way for you to get as clear and as engaging as if you were going to deliver a TED Talk.
I see.
So it's using similar principles so that you can persuade or motivate or whatever it is that your goal is.
Very interesting. I'm always looking for more to learn on a communication, Nick. I will recommend business leaders who are watching us, reach out to you, connect with you, have a discussion with you.
Thanks.
And take your communication game. If you're a business leader and you're not working on communication, you're missing out something. Because big part of business is all day we communicate to people. That's
right. Yeah, it's core. It's actually the most important thing we do all day, and we take it for granted. Truly.
Yeah. And the take up and running, man. I would recommend that highly. That it's a clarity I get. One thing I did on the COVID was I needed to be more clear, not less clear during the COVID, because now not only you need to take care of your health, but also you need to take care of staff as well. You got to make sure that they're taken care, and you can't take care of anybody else unless you're taking care of yourself, right? So I scaled up running a little bit more, and the clarity I gained after every jog. It was. I was just surprised by that. Gained so much clarity. I was able to put ideas on a paper and work more even harder to move forward.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's, again, as a fellow runner, I love it, and I get out there, and no matter how cold it is, you can still get out there for half an hour, 45 minutes. Yeah.
It works better than any medicine. If you can sweat it out outside, you don't need to worry about any other coming your way. Good stuff. Hey, I enjoy our discussion. Learned so much from you, Nick, and and I hope a business leader take up our offer and connect with you and join your acceleration program. And order your book as well. I'm waiting for my book to arrive, and maybe we need another podcast after I go through your book, Nick.
Anytime, Gurmeet. It's a pleasure to chat with you and connect. And thank you for the thoughtful questions, and appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Nick. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. Hi there. Thank you so much for investing time with us and watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. For next episode, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and send your feedback. Until next time, have yourself a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.